Okay, so we've had a look at the importing of CAD generated content. So in the earlier videos, I showed you that you can import something you've exported from Revit, and don't forget the other import options you have. Now I'm showing you under References and then the File Link Manager. You have basically the same options when you import, but I'll show you it's a little bit different there. But just coming back to References, File Link Manager, you can tell when you click on the File button here that you have basically two formats that you can link: DWG and FBX. DXF is really just a variation on DWG. Okay, so generally these days programs that can export DXF can also export DWG. I suppose worst case, if you happen to be using an old version of ArchiCAD or something and it can't make DWG, then you can use DXF. But I think it was a long time ago they gave you the option of exporting DWG from ArchiCAD. So as long as you can create a DWG or DXF or an FBX file, and really the only program that will let you create FBX files, the only CAD program is Revit. So if you can create either of those, any of those formats, then you can link that file into 3D Studio Max. And that's probably the best way to work if you're bringing stuff in from a CAD program. Cancel this though, I just wanted to show you those formats.
So is it best to bring in the CAD in the Revit format that are the Revit files pack?
Oh, you can't. You can't import a BIM from any BIM program in the native format because BIM programs store things in a totally different way.
So if I was to just grab my new model that I've made in Revit
Yep.
and just bring in DWG.
Oh, no, you've got to export. You've got to export from Revit. And even though you can export to DWG from Revit, it's best to export to FBX. And so what that process really is doing is taking just the 3D parts from the BIM model and making them into a separate file. So using the File Link Manager, those are the only options, those two formats basically, or three really, but essentially two basic options or formats. When you go to import, it's similar, but using import the file won't be linked, but you have many more formats that you can import. So this is mainly for bringing things in from other 3D programs or from older CAD programs as well. So some of them, SAP, for example, is a format that some CAD programs still will export to. But a lot of these say, the other formats here, so you can, SketchUp files actually, you can bring in this way. Lightscape and so on, the Maya format, which I always go blank on, OBJ is one of them, and I've forgotten the other one right now, but anyhow, you can bring in most 3D formats that way. So that's...
Sorry,
yeah, sure.
how do you say the Revit file to that
FBX, yeah, just on the main menu. So just like here, you've got a main menu in Revit, and then if you go down to export, you'll have the option to choose FBX in the list there. I was going to open Revit up, but you'll find it as long as you can find export on the main menu in Revit. Okay, so that's probably how you're going to bring in most of your geometry, how you're going to be creating most of your geometry for your visualization. But then you'll also need to create some geometry natively in 3D Studio Max, and then other things you might need to modify. So things that have already been done in a CAD program, you'll then need to develop up or add things to or change things in 3D Studio Max. So you're going to have a pretty good idea about the modeling options that you have. Right, and so you can basically break it down into three, well, I suppose really four different approaches. Now we're going to be focusing really on two of those, and so I might just close the door. Okay, so we're basically going to be focusing on two of the options that you have in 3D Studio Max. I just want to briefly point them all out, but the ones we're using mainly are starting with primitives. And you can see over here on the right-hand side, you've got this area, it's called the command panel. So you've got these tabs going from left to right. The first one's create, then modify, and then these others we'll look at in more detail later: hierarchy, motion, display, and utilities. But the main two, create and modify, are the ones we'll be doing most things with initially, especially when we're looking at modelling. So create, you can always think of like the draw menu in AutoCAD, that's where you make things, and then modify, it's like the modify menu in AutoCAD, it's where you, it's what you use to edit and change things. So on the create panel there, you've then got all these different kinds of objects you can create. Now, not all of these are geometry. It's mainly the first two that give you geometry. Again, so geometry is the first one. The next one, shapes, also creates geometry, but more things like lines and circles and polygons, as opposed to the things you get in the geometry section, which are mainly things that are 3D to begin with. So boxes, cones, spheres, and things like that have a mass. As opposed to I mean, they're not all flat, but you can kind of think of them as flat shapes. So rectangles, arcs, stars, they're all things that don't have a 3D volume initially. Even though Blue and White can actually make them have that. So anyhow, going on to the first panel here, you've then got these basic primitives, and that's one of the ways that you can start creating objects in 3D Studio Max. And most 3D programs will give you this option. So using primitives, you can create things like boxes, spheres, cones, and so on. Then there's other kinds, I'll show you those in a moment. So there are extended primitives and other more complex geometry you can create as well. So that's what I mean by parametric objects. So things that have properties you can adjust. And just so I can demonstrate some of the other parts of the interface, I'll make probably the most simple, but one of the most used, which is box. So the basic creation process, if I click on box, is to click and drag in a viewport, and then once you've set the base by clicking and then releasing two diagonally opposite points, then you move the cursor to then click to set a height. Now, the view controls are very similar to other Autodesk programs. Holding down the wheel, hands, rolling the wheel in and out, zooms, backwards and forwards, and then if you hold down Alt and then the wheel as well, it orbits. So unlike, sorry? It does, but in Revit it's Shift. So Revit and AutoCAD it's Shift, in 3D Studio Max it's Alt. I know it's annoying that it's different, but just go back to the history. Alright, so you can see now over in the command panel, I've got these properties, length, width, and height. Now, whenever you see a field like this in 3D Studio Max that has arrows to the right, and you can see all over the place, those arrows are going to come up. They'll come up down here, they'll come up here, and in all sorts of places. You'll see those things, they're called spinners, those arrows, and so you can click and hold your cursor down on them, and that makes them go up or down. But it's actually much easier if you click and drag up or down. And that's why they're called spinners. So that's why people often ask, how do you stretch? Because there are no grips you can drag, like in CAD programs where you can, you can definitely drag the corner points, but not while it's a box. But you can still intuitively adjust the size just using the spinners over there. So same here and here. But so that's a common thing throughout the program. And then just to quickly point out some of the other main parts of the interface, up the top you've got the main toolbar just below the menus. So the menus are just like any other program. We'll be going through different things on those. And obviously you've got the main menu up in the top left corner, like all the other Autodesk programs. They're doing that now. But then below that, this toolbar here probably has most of the main tools, apart from the ones that you'll get in the command panel. So up there, you can see you've got all these selection tools over on the left. And at first, you probably won't use all of those, but then you can see about a third of the way across, you've got move, rotate, and scale. And they're actually selection tools as well. So at first, they'll be your main selection tools, because it's select and move, select and rotate, or select and scale. And quite often you just leave it on select and move, and that way, well, I'll just make another box so you can see. Okay, so you can click to select, and that also lets you move if you want to. Click and move, or you can actually just click and move at the same time. But you can do the same thing with, say, rotate, so you can click and rotate, or just click to select. So they're your main selection tools. We'll be going through most of these other tools. In fact, we'll probably go through all of them at some stage on the main toolbar there. But basically it's good with those selection tools on the first part there, and then as you go across, you've got a lot of options after that. So things like snaps. So if you remember snaps from different CAD programs, I'll just quickly show you. This is the snaps button, and you can always just hold your cursor over these to see what they do. So that's snaps. Right clicking gives you the options, again like a lot of CAD programs. So you might remember a lot of these snaps from AutoCAD, and even Revit has most of these. So endpoint, midpoint, tangent, perpendicular, they're all things that you have in AutoCAD and like I said, Revit as well. All right, so and it actually uses the same symbols. So you'll see if I've got endpoint on, it uses square just like AutoCAD. The midpoint symbol is a little bit different. So it's not a triangle, it's a square with a cross through it. But a lot of it is similar to other Autodesk programs. Okay, so lots of other options up there. You've also got layers in 3D Studio Max, but they're actually optional. They work almost exactly the same as AutoCAD layers, but at first you don't even need to use them. So I'll close that. And I'll even close this other toolbar, just so you can see that main toolbar on its own. So they're the tools that you really want to focus on initially, all those tools up there. Whenever you see something like a teapot, it's usually to do with rendering. So again, a bit like Revit where you've got a little teapot at the bottom. So I suppose I can just do a quick bit of there. That teapot, it's not going to be anything special, but you can see that has rendering for me.
With the layers, when we bring our Revit drawing in, will it come with those layers?
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So this program, although you said layers are optional, they'll still be AutoCAD?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, I know I said they're optional, but it's just like AutoCAD. If you don't make any layers or put anything on layers, everything's just on layer 0. So it's exactly like AutoCAD in that way. But it doesn't rely so much on layers like AutoCAD, I suppose, because there are other ways of hiding and unhiding and things like that. But if you want to use layers to do that, it's fine as well. So apart from the toolbars, then and the command panel, you've then got the viewport, which is obviously really important because that's where you see your objects, that's where you select them and do a lot of the operations with them. So you can see in each viewport we've got these different labels in the corner. So each viewport has 3 labels. So to begin with, you've got the plus. Now you can see here also that the perspective viewport is the active one. So it's got the yellow border around it. So if I right click on the plus there, I get some options for that viewport. Now, right clicking on the plus here, notice how it's not giving me the options. That's because that viewport isn't active yet. So to make it active, the easiest way is to right click. If you left click, it'll actually make it active, but it also selects, because when you left click, you select somewhere. And so you can see it deselected that box for me. And I probably wouldn't want that. If I've selected something, I probably want to keep it selected. So instead, it's best to right click, because that keeps the selection that you've got. And you don't accidentally select something you don't want as well. So right clicking, that's standard. You'll do that all the time when you're working in Macs. You probably right click more than you left click. Okay, and then now I can right click on the plus, and again I get the basic options for that viewport. Then, and we'll go through these, but they're something that you can probably leave alone at first. Then, the next label, where it's got front at the moment, that gives you things to do with the view, basically the view direction. So here you can see I've got cameras, and I don't have any cameras at the moment in this scene, so I can't choose anything there. Also, I don't have any lights, so I can't choose anything there. But then below that, I've got perspective, orthographic, top, bottom, and so on. So they're my view directions. So I could set this to say bottom. So I'm looking from underneath, so it's basically a mirror of what I've got over here. And change that to left, and now it's the same as this view over down to the left. If you choose orthographic, it won't actually change it, because orthographic is just a non perpendicular view. So I'll just go back. If I go to say front, see there it's got front. As soon as I orbit this view, so I'll just do it the way I showed you before, Alt and the middle mouse button, it changes to orthographic. So choosing orthographic from there doesn't really do much. But you've got those other presets, so that's an easy way of changing the view direction. You can also use the view cube. And then you've got other options that relate to the kind of view that it is. So then the third option gives you basically the shading options for that viewport. So you can choose things like smooth and highlights, wireframe, hidden line. So they're displays you'd probably be used to from CAD programs. And all this is by right clicking, by the way. But then you've got a few options that you don't have in CAD programs, like hardware shading. So if you've got an expensive graphics card, it doesn't really use it until you turn this option on. Once you choose hardware shading, you can see not much has changed there, but now I'm going to go again to that menu. You can see it opens up all these options that weren't there before. So I can enable shadows, I can enable ambient occlusion. Still, not much has changed, but watch what happens if I put some more objects there. So I'll create a plane now. And I'll just move that. Oh, I've got snap on. Okay, so I'll just move that plane under my objects. And so you can see there, I've got some shadows. The direction of the shadows is fixed now, because so no matter how I rotate my objects, the shadow direction is always going to be the same in this viewport, because I haven't made any lights. It still will give me shadows because there are some default lights until I make one. But you'll see once I make a light, I'll just make a standard light, and let's use an area omni. So area spot. So now that I've got that light, I can see the shadows in the viewport, and that's an option you only get when you have hardware shading turned on. Alright, so it can be really intuitive. Setting up your lighting, you can just do graphically in the viewport. Much more intuitive than in CAD programs. But again, all those options are on that last panel, under lighting and shadows here. So, oh, sorry. Oh, no, I thought you had a question.
Sorry.
No, I just thought you had a question, that's fine. So, okay, so that is actually one of the best things in 3D Studio Max compared to other 3D programs even. Because, I mean, Maya can kind of do this, but, well, I'll just show you. It is a great tool. When you start getting into things like semi-transparent materials, other 3D programs, even really expensive ones, can struggle a bit. Whereas 3D Studio Max, no problem. You can have, say, a material that has pattern, and this pattern cuts out. So I'm just going to make this bigger because I can't see it. In fact, what I'll do, is use a simpler one because I don't want to worry too much about the size here. So I'll use just do a checker cutout. Make it easy. Okay, so that should be working. Why isn't it? Let's have a look there. Cutout, yes, that's fine. Because I'm using Arc and Design and I don't have MentorRay set as my renderer, but I've got V-Ray. So it's just from what I was saying before. Yeah, okay, so I'm using V-Ray there. I don't want to show you V-Ray, I want to show you MentorRay. So let's go to that. There we are. Okay, so, and I will do so. I mean, that's okay, but cellular will be a bit more interesting. So I can have a cutout pattern instead of based on boring old checkers, which are okay. Cellular will do a more interesting cutout on my object. Might not look like it's cut out there, but you'll see if I put a background in, it's actually cut out based on my cellular pattern. And now that, if I put it onto the cylinder there and turn on shading in the viewport, notice how not only do I see the cutout on the cylinder, but in the lighting as well. So all that's in real time. In other words, we can see it in the viewport as we're working, don't need to worry about rendering to see those effects, which really can speed up the whole process. So, again, all those options you've got in each viewport. It's often a good idea to have one viewport set to really high quality and leave the others set to simpler displays like hidden line and wireframe, just to keep things running quickly. So then just to continue going through the other parts of the interface, you've got then down below, this thing here is your time slider. Now, if you're not doing animation, you can actually hide this, but you will be doing some animation before long, so it's probably worth leaving it there. And then, you know, if you haven't got animation, it's not going to have any effect sliding that, but it's actually not hard to do animations. I'll just do a very simple one. So say this this box here, I might want to have it move, and maybe I'll get it to change size or something. So I'm going to drag my time slider over to the right, turn on this option called Auto, which is Auto key, and I'm going to just simply move my box over to here, maybe, and then, so it's not a very interesting animation. Let's just go back a bit to halfway, and I'll make the box maybe skirt around. Oh no, let's just bring it over here. So it's going to do at least a bit slightly more interesting move. Okay, so that's nothing special, but it's moving. And then I'll make it change size along the way as well. So using the same spinners, I can change, say, let's just change the length. I'll change all three, length, width and height, and then coming across I can make it get bigger just before it finishes. So I'll bring it up close to its original size. And then maybe right at the end I'll scale it. Oh no, that's not very interesting. I'll rotate it. There we go. Okay, so that rotation will be spread out over the whole part. So now, play that through. All right, so all that's based on this time slider. So you can always drag that once you've set an animation up and see what's happening at any frame. So that's what that section is for. And then below that, you've got some other controls that are all to do with animation. So from this key onwards, all the way over to these play controls, that they're all basically your animation controls. So then just to finish off these other controls at the bottom, the parts to the left, we'll go more into these once you start using the different tools, but you've got a basic coordinate readout there, things like that. And then over on the right, bottom right corner, you've got these 8 buttons, which are all to do with your display controls. So things like zoom, pan, all those basic view controls you have in any program. When you're in a perspective view or a camera view, they change a little bit. But in a orthographic view, it's probably easiest to see the basic controls. So you've got things like, as well as zoom and pan, zoom extents, and zoom extents all selected, which again are very similar to the sorts of things you have in AutoCAD. All right, so most of the time though, you can use the wheel to zoom in and out and pan and do things like that, pan and orbit. I suppose zoom extents, it's important to know that's there because that's something you'll often want to do at first, to zoom around a particular object or something like that. And it doesn't hurt to know about the zoom control you have here, because notice how much smoother that is compared to the wheel. So when it's going in too quickly or in big increments, you can always use that to do things a bit more gently. So I'll just point out the last button there, the maximise viewport toggle, is the one I've been using to make the active viewport take up the whole screen. The shortcuts I'll tell you along the way, they're also in the notes I'm going to give you, but Alt-W is the shortcut for that one. So that's one you use all the time. And so just coming back to these objects to finish off, like I said, they're all primitives. In other words, they are created on the command panel where it's got standard primitives. You've also then got extended primitives, which are really just more complex forms. So I'll just quickly show you a couple of the other primitives. Believe it or not, a teapot is a standard primitive. Pyramids, things like that, they're all primitives. Oh, yeah, absolutely, yep. Toruses are basically donuts. Right, so any of these things, so you can see that pyramid there that has a set of parameters, just like the box. And so you can, they're pretty self-explanatory when you go through those parameters. Also, they've got segments, which we'll come back to and spend more time on, but just so you can quickly see, I can add detail to these objects by increasing the segments. So that teapot there, when it doesn't have many segments, looks a bit jagged. But with more segments, it becomes more detailed.
How did you get to that screen?
Yeah, so this is the modify tab. So at first, it comes up in the create panel when you're making something. So I'll just make, say, a tube. And so you can see as I create it, the properties come up over here, but once you're done creating it, you get the same properties in the next panel under modify, exactly the same. And so you can adjust things at any stage. And that's why primitives can be good, because you can always adjust them using those original parameters. But then that can only get you so far. I mean, even with the more complex shapes you've got in extended primitives, like say a torus knot and things like that, so they're a bit more involved, and you know, you've got all sorts of really good preset forms. Gengon, sorry? Oh yeah, hose, yeah, that's actually a really good one too. Believe it or not, Gengons are really powerful as well for certain things, because you can set curves and all sorts of things with them, so they can do fairly complex forms. So can Hedras. Hedras actually can do really complex forms. So lots of really good primitives there. Might not look like anything special until I change the parameters. Just a diamond at the moment, but so you can do, and that's just with a tetra. Once you get to octa, dodeca, stars, and again, all parametrically driven. Right, but again, that can only get you so far because there are only so many preset shapes they can give you. Or preset forms, I should say. There are lots there to choose from, and these are only the first two panels. You've got tons of others. Like, we'll just quickly say doors and windows are an obvious one that you have. So you do have doors and windows in Max that in some ways are better than the ones you get in CAD programs. You don't get a plan of your door, but it's a full 3D door, so you can open and close it. And, you know, sliding doors obviously do the same thing. Oh, automatically it'll assign random colours if you want it to, so I've just got it set to do that. So no, you can draw in any of these viewports. So I could have drawn that in the top viewport if I wanted it to be in a certain line or something. Oh yeah, so I'll just do one. Okay, so I'll do the one I haven't shown you yet, bifold. Okay, so you just draw as you would normally in a CAD program, and then once you let go, even though you're looking from above, when you move the mouse, so I've still got to set the jam, but now when I move the cursor, even though I'm in the top viewport, it'll set the height. So it can be a bit tricky if you've got the top viewport maximised because you can't actually see it coming up, but it'll still do that. Yeah. And so again, this, because it's a parametric 3D door, will open automatically, and you can animate that obviously really easily. So, you know, you've got all those preset things, but quite often they're a good starting point, but you need to do more to get the form that you're after. So, say you might be making a cushion or something, or maybe a seat that's based on this basic shape, but you want to go and have, I don't know, legs or something that are coming out of the sides. And so just to give you a quick, simple example, I'll, just isolate this, and my, so my menu's just playing up a bit because of my recording software. So I'm going to use the shortcut, Alt Q, and right. So, oh, I don't know why that happened. Anyhow, okay. So that now is a an object on its own, but it hasn't changed. I wonder why the lights went. Anyhow, I'm just going to change it now into something else. So I'll quickly just show you again in the modify panel. It's a torus. If I right click, that now can be converted to an editable poly. And instead of having properties like width and height and radius, it's got properties like vertex, edge, polygon. So those are the different parts that we can see here. So we've got different faces, different edges between those faces, and then at the end of each edge, you've got vertices. And I can move those individual points. And this is what people mean when they talk about polygonal modelers. So you're working with the individual polygons. So I can pull that out, or I can pull a group of them out, right? Or do different things with them. So, like I said, I might want to make a seat or legs or flying saucer out of this, I don't know. So I'll go and maybe select some polygons down the bottom. So I'll grab a group there, or a couple there, and I'll go around and grab a couple on the other side. Just sort of guessing where a third is. I think that's probably about right. And then some more over here. Oops. Yeah, that'll do. Okay, so working with individual polygons, I can do things like extrude just those parts out, and then I can again bring them out in different ways. So I could, so I'll just use a few little shortcuts here to make this work a bit better. So I could say bring those, oops, sorry, it's just playing up on me, so I just want to bring them down, and it's not letting me. Because I've got open edges, so just 1 second. Delete, and there we are. So there we are, so I can, bring them down and do other things with them that I couldn't do if it was still a torus. Okay, so by breaking it down to its basic elements, you can then, do more complex modelling operations. So that's what's meant by polygonal modelling, which is the other main kind of modelling that we'll be doing in Max. So you'll be often starting with primitives or other related forms, like shapes, but then quite often you need to convert it into a polygonal model and work with all these more detailed modelling tools that you have. And there's a huge number, won't go into them right now, but a huge number of modelling tools that you have here, and then you might smooth it all out. Quite often you don't need it to be even all that complicated, because you can, after you've got the basic form, smooth it out and get something that has more detail. So well, so that's the other major kind of modelling that I really wanted to show you. But I also mentioned quickly the other two, because I said at the beginning there were four. So I've looked at parametric and polygonal. The interesting thing with polygonal modelling is that you can't directly create a polygonal mesh, but you can convert almost anything into it. The other kinds of models, though, that you make, patch grids and NURBS, you can create directly, or you can convert things into them. So patch grids are kind of interesting, because they're kind of a Max thing. Other programs have them as well, but it's mainly 3ds Studio Max that's kept going with them. And patches, I think, are really underrated. So I will be showing you some things with patch grids, because patches almost like a cross between NURBS and... So I'll just get out of this this mode as well. They're almost a cross between NURBS and... sorry, it's playing up on me. And polygonal meshes, the ones I was just showing you. So I just want to get this into an area that's got more light on it. Yeah, that's better. Bring it down so you can really see what's happening on that surface. Okay, so you can see with this, it's got edges and faces like a polygon, but then also it's got these control points on the corners that let you adjust the curves of each edge. So for organic forms, they can actually work really well, especially where you need still to have a reasonable degree of accuracy. They're a really good modelling tool. Then the other one, NURBS, again is mainly used for organic modelling, and they are a great tool. So you can create them directly, or you can convert things, just like I did the polygonal mesh. So I'll actually do it by converting. It's going to make a box, and just to quickly show you, I'm going to right click on it and go down to convert to, and then NURBS. NURBS, in case you're wondering, it stands for non-uniform rational B-spline. You don't need to remember that, but it is one of those common modelling operations that, or forms that you have with lots of different 3D programs. Like I said, Rhino uses them all the time, and Maya, you have used them quite a lot as well. So it's kind of like patches in that you've got these control points, but they work a bit differently. They work more with a weighting, but at the end of the day, you still often get a similar result. So you get these kind of organic curved surfaces based on the weighting that you assign to those different control points. So we'll just get some different... Oh, there's just a toggle, so F3 on the keyboard, but also you can use the option up here, smooth and highlights, or wireframe does the same thing. Okay, so you can see there, it's changing that surface based on wherever those control points go, and do the same everywhere. In some ways it's pretty intuitive, but then to get control over NURBS modelling, you really do need to spend a lot of time. There's a lot of different modelling processes used with NURBS, so I'm not going to do a lot with that. If you're interested though, I can give you some pointers. I've done fairly complex models with NURBS, but I mean, I think it's pretty good in Max, but honestly I think other programs are better at NURBS than Max is. But it's there if you want it. So they're the four basic modelling types you've got: parametric, polygonal, patches, NURBS, and in the command panel here you can get to most of them, but don't forget that other little option I showed you before, right-clicking and then going to convert to, lets you change to these different options. Now notice how there you've got one other option, convert to editable mesh, and I didn't mention that because basically editable poly is just an updated version of an editable mesh. So it's kind of a legacy. It's really just there in case you get something from an old release, but you shouldn't use that option in general. Poly's better. So anyhow, I'll give you a chance to have a go at some of these exercises. You'll be able to make a start on it at least before the shop closes downstairs. So I'll just finish recording and I'll show you where the notes are.